Welcome back to Comical Opinions. We're going to cover a little bit of an article that came out from ICv2 that they put out regularly, that they put out on a regular basis, that doesn't quite get the same amount of attention as their monthly top 50 rankings for which comics sold better than others and all the excitement that comes around with that article. But I think it's more important that we understand what this article is all about, what it means for the different publishers and how they're vying for attention when we talk about a zero-sum game, and why it is imperative that a lot of the smaller publishers understand the lessons of this article and what it really means. So the ICv2 article is what they call their market share report. They put it out on a quarterly basis, and basically what it shows is for all the comic retailers that they sell comics for the different publishers, which publisher gets the most percentage of sales and therefore the most percentage of attention. Now I have it up on the screen. I'll put a link to it in the description below so you can read the article for yourself. But if you look at the graph, which is basically the focal point of the article, you see exactly what matters most, which is which publisher gets basically the biggest chunk or the biggest slice of the pie. In this case, of course, it's not surprising, it's Marvel. DC is second to that. Then you get Image, and then on and on down the line, IDW, Dark Horse, Boom, etc. It's a pretty predictable layout if you think about it as far as what comics are being published by which publishers and who's marketing them and who has the most popular characters and on and on and on. Now you may say to yourself, well, that makes sense because Marvel is the best publisher. They put out the best comics. They have the greatest characters. They have the top writers. They have the top artists. And if unfortunately that is not the case, a lot of people will say, wait a minute, Marvel kind of sucks right now. And yeah, Marvel sucks right now. Their quality of storytelling is really, really poor. Their editorial oversight is just almost, I would say, non-existent. Just as bad, if maybe not worse, than DC. The quality of the physical books, if you go into an LCA shop and you pick up a book and you hold it in your hands, I mean, it is cheap, super, super cheap. So you might be sitting there thinking to yourself, well, if Marvel is taking these really iconic characters like Spider-Man and the Avengers and Daredevil and whoever else, but the quality of their output is so poor, how do they still have the most market share? And the answer is, I think, pretty simple. It comes in the form of one word: habit. Marvel is still the top dog when it comes to getting the most attention and hogging the most amount of sales because they have trained their readers to get in the habit of buying their comics, regardless of how poor they are, regardless of how cheap they are, regardless of how terrible the stories are. If you're an Amazing Spider-Man fan, you know exactly what I'm talking about. Marvel is at a really, really low point, especially for Amazing Spider-Man fans. Especially for X-Men fans, they are in the dumpster right now. But people keep buying them. And they buy them because of the word habit. They establish a habit. So the reason that's important to understand is because when you're creating a fan base and you want people invested in your characters, whether it's superhero or not, I mean, it could be in any number of genres. When you develop a fan base and people get interested in your character, they reach what they call a point of passion. It's a little bit of a switch. It's like flipping a switch. And when you reach that point of passion, the reader, who's a customer, will want everything about that character. They're super invested and that they've created some kind of emotional bond. Marvel knows this, and they will capitalize on this, and they will squeeze that reader until there is no money left to squeeze out. That's why you get gimmicks, and that's why you get #1 reboots with the same creative teams and events that are effectively meaningless. They know the readers are hooked. They know they have what they call Marvel zombies, and they're going to continue to capitalize on that. And as long as they keep squeezing the money out, they're not incentivized to change. So let's talk. And so that's Marvel. And to a lesser degree, that's also DC. Let's be honest. You know, Superman is iconic. Batman is iconic. You have a lot of that same mentality going on with the big two. So what happens with the smaller publishers, the mid-sized publishers? Why are they so far behind, and what can they do to catch up? You're not going to make Marvel change. You're not going to make DC change, and not unless they are incentivized to do it on their own. And they'd have to wipe out their leadership, and that's a whole different conversation. But what can the smaller publishers do to kind of learn the lessons, avoid the mistakes, and then maybe get through time and enough effort and attention, get a bigger slice of that pie. So there's really two things that they're going to fix that problem. And I'm really speaking now from a more of a marketing perspective. This may seem like dry material, but really if you're an indie publisher, all these same lessons apply. If you are a very, very small publisher that is just starting out, all these same lessons apply. If you're just at all thinking about marketing really to anything where in a market where there's competition, these same lessons apply. This is mostly about entertainment, but you get the idea. Really, there are two major areas where these smaller publishers like Boom, like Dynamite, like Oni, if they do these two things, that won't guarantee that they'll hog Marvel out, but at least will put them on that right path. So what's the first thing they have to do? They have to pick a genre. They have to make a genre the core of who they are and establish it as part of their brand identity. That's a very fancy marketing term to say when I stop somebody on the street and I say, tell me about Viz Media. What's the first thing that come to your mind? Now, that one's a little bit easy because it's manga. But if I were to say, for example, stop somebody on the street and I said, tell me about Zenescope Entertainment. What are they known for? There might be a little bit of a struggle there. If I say, tell me what Dynamite is known for, there's definitely going to be a struggle there. If I do the same thing with Titan, Mad Cave, all the way down the line, there's a struggle there to say, what are they known for? If you say Marvel and DC, you know what they're known for. It's superheroes. Now, Marvel has done things in the past like war comics and even dabbled a little bit in romance comics. And then when you go over to DC, they have their kind of like off-brand imprints. But by and large, if you say Marvel and DC, people think superheroes. Okay, that's fine. The smaller publishers, with a few exceptions, don't have that. And that's where I think where they are struggling and where they need to kind of get that fixed up. So here's a few examples. Let's start with Mad Cave. I love Mad Cave. We love Mad Cave here. We review some of their stuff. It's a good publisher, lots of great people. And if you're interested in ever doing reviews, they have by far the best press portal for getting media, for getting reviews, for getting the preview images of any publisher I've interacted with. And we interact with Marvel and DC as well. So I can tell you for a fact that Mad Cave has the best setup if you're interested in running reviews or doing press for them. And just as an aside, hats off to them. So where do they run into trouble? I think if you look at what their bread and butter is, or at least what put them on the map, it was titles like Battle Cats, Honor and Curse, Hunt, Kill, Repeat, which is more recent but still kind of fits in that same vein. Those are the things that put them on the map. Those are the things that got them attention. But if you look at their lineup today of all the different comics, and they also do, they take indie created stuff as well beyond what they produce internally. It's all over the map. I mean, they have a YA imprint. Now they're starting up a manga imprint. They have creator-owned stuff from all over the place. Stuff from Cullen Bunn, stuff from Zach Thompson. Their core identity, their brand identity has been diffused. So if you said to me, what is Mad Cave known for? They're known for doing comics and stuff that's not the big two. Yeah, but that's not really a brand identity. So if just as a suggestion, it's not, I won't say they should do this, but I would say if they were trying to pick something, I would say something like heroic fantasy. Heroic fantasy as a genre is what got them on the map. Knights of the Golden Sun, that's heroic fantasy. Battle Cats, that's heroic fantasy. They don't necessarily have to pick heroic fantasy as that genre. They can pick any genre they want, but they have to pick one and make it part of their core identity. And what does that mean? That means take all the comics that they're producing, whether it's indie created or something they produce internally, and make sure it fits within that scope of whatever genre they pick. Build up that solid fan base, and then that will attract a particular audience that is very interested in heroic fantasy. Now, maybe they don't want to do heroic fantasy. Maybe they want to do romance. Maybe they want to do sci-fi. Whatever it is, it doesn't matter. Pick one, stick with it, develop that foundation, and then you can branch out later. Here's another example. Dynamite. One of our favorites. We do Dynamite stuff all the time, although we've fallen off lately because Christopher Priest on Vampirella is a mess. And Thundercats had so much potential, but no, they just never got it off the ground. They are one of our favorite smaller publishers, and they have 2% of the market share. They're on the list. But what that really means is by 2%, that really means that for every 100 people that go into a comic book shop, only 2 will buy a Dynamite comic. So they definitely don't have a big piece of the pie. So the similar problem, if you said to somebody, hey, tell me about Dynamite Comics. You're familiar with Dynamite Comics. What are they known for? They might say they're known for certain characters like Vampirella. They might be known for Red Sonja, maybe some of the Army of Darkness stuff with the Evil Dead. But that doesn't really kind of clue you into who they are and what is their identity. They have the same problem. They need to pick a core genre, build on that, make sure all their titles are focused on that. Then when they have a very solid fan base, a repeatable, consistent fan base, then they can branch out and do some other things. For them, I would say something like Grindhouse Pulp. They're like more pulpy type characters, but they're not afraid to get into the blood and guts of things, put that together. And that's the beauty of picking a genre. You can make one up if one doesn't exist. It doesn't exist for you. Make up a genre, stick to that genre, and then push it going forward. For them, something like Grindhouse Pulp would incorporate the pulpy characters like Deja Thoris, like John Carter, like some of the things from the early 20th century. They can incorporate those in, but they can get a little bit raunchy with it. They can get a little titillation going on. They can get a little gory with it. Not too much, but enough. And then Vampirella fits perfectly in that. Red Sonja fits perfectly in that. Ash Williams, even though it's a completely different time frame and a brand of storytelling, still fits within that group. Build up your base, move forward. I'm going to give you one more example. Titan Comics. Now, Titan has a hit on their hands right now with Conan the Barbarian. That's through Jim Zub and their partnership with the Hero Initiative. But they have it. It's a big hit. But if you say, what is Titan known for? You might get a weird kind of sense of, oh, yeah, that's that European publisher, and they do some stuff. They've got Conan, but they also do like the weird things like Star Wars magazines, and they do some Doctor Who adaptations, and they did those Blade Runner miniseries, which were pretty okay. Maybe they do those Life is Strange and Bloodborne video game adaptations. So in other words, they're all over the map. So if you grab somebody and said, what is Titan known for? It's nothing but confusion because there's all kinds of stuff going on, but none of it feels like it kind of gives you focus to say, what is this publisher known for? So here's another, I'm going to make this up. I'm going to make up the genre right here on the spot. I'm going to call it literary pulp noir. And the reason I say that is because a lot of the stuff that they have gotten success with, like Conan, like Blade Runner, and even their hard case imprint, which is sort of crime stuff, like Gun Honey and Heat Seeker, those are all based upon books. So they're doing literary adaptations. But the books that they're adapting are kind of pulpy, they're kind of smoky, kind of sultry. So that's where the noir comes in. That's the beauty of this approach, is you can make up a genre if one doesn't exist. But what you do is once you define your genre, then it makes it a lot easier to say, okay, what comics should we make? What properties should we adapt? When indie creators are coming to us and they say they want us to publish their stuff, what kind of stories do we want to focus on? If you stay focused, you develop your brand identity, then you can push it forward. Here's an example of a smaller publisher, like a really small publisher, that does this part right. It's a publisher that you may not have heard of called Dead Sky Publishing. I'm going to call them DSP for short, just to kind of get through it. If you pulled me aside and said, what is Dead Sky Publishing known for? I would say Western-themed splatter horror. Now you say, well, what is that? Well, that's horror, and it's splatter horror, which means it's very gory, lots of blood splattering everywhere, and it's usually in a Western setting, like the Old West, cowboys, that sort of thing. So even though that maybe not be everybody's cup of tea, which is perfectly fine, but if you pull me aside and say, what is Dead Sky Publishing or DSP, what are they known for? They're known for Western-themed splatter horror. And I've got it. And that makes it really easy for them and makes it really easy for me as a reader. For them, it's easy because whenever somebody's coming up with story ideas, whenever creators, writers, whoever are approaching them, they're saying, we're looking for Western-themed splatter horror. What do you got? And that makes it really easy. When I, as a reader, and I'm looking for something in the horror genre, something, kind of spooky or gross, or if I'm a gore hound, that makes it really easy for me to go to them. It makes that connection because they're establishing what is brand identity. Now, that's not to say you can't do other genres. Publishers should be okay with doing other genres, but you have to have your core foundation. You have to have that base where if a reader comes to you, they know exactly what they can rely on as your mainstay. What is your baseline? And then once you've got that worked out and once you've got your fan base in place and set, then when you get make money, which is the goal here, then you can branch out and maybe try some things that are maybe have overlapping interests. For example, it seems strange to me, but I'm not sure why. Superhero comic readers tend to have a lot of overlap with wrestling, like professional wrestling, WWF or WWE and that sort of thing. But superhero comic readers, for whatever reason, tend to not overlap with horror. So you got to find those overlaps and then you can branch out. But you got to get the base down first. Okay, so that's number one. Number two, habits take time and consistent persistence. No publisher is going to build a steady, reliable fan base with miniseries. They have to have ongoings. They have to have ongoings that fit within their core genre, and they have to put them out on a reliable basis. Now, might say month to month is too much. That's fine. Do quarterly. Now, even quarterly is a stretch because you want those stories and those characters top of mind for the reader when they come into the LCS to look for a new comic or to pick something up that they've been waiting for. But you're not going to do it with one-offs, one-shots, miniseries that are 3, 4, or 5, or 6. You got to work that out. There has to be a stream of ongoing comics. Don't think in raindrops. Think in streams. So Marvel and DC dominate because they do this. You have comics that are published month in, month out. Doesn't matter how terrible they are. Amazing Spider-Man fans, again, I'm looking at you. X-Men fans, again, I'm looking at you. Doesn't matter how terrible they are. They keep putting them out. So at the very least, the readers, when they go in, know that their comic is going to be there. You don't get people hooked on a miniseries. You get them hooked with consistent, persistent output. That means you have to have at least a schedule that people can rely on. But, some people might say, well, this miniseries won an Eisner. Well, okay, you got to put out of your mind. Eisners mean nothing when it comes to sales and reader retention. Readers don't care about the Eisners. Why? Because, for the most part, most people don't even know what the Eisners are. They don't know that they exist. And there's never been any evidence to show that the Eisners generate sales. So put that out of your mind. Eisners mean nothing when it comes to sales and developing a fan base. It's just a nice badge to put on a resume, but ultimately it means nothing. You've got to get away from the miniseries approach to output, and you have to do steady stream of ongoings, at least 2, 3, 4. Zenescope has at least one ongoing, but that honestly for them, it's not enough. They need 2 or 3 at least. So those are the 2 big items. Now you may say to yourself, okay, well, those are genres that are not Marvel and DC. What if I want to do something different? What if I want to do superheroes? What if I want to do some kind of variant on Superman or Spider-Man or Batman or whatever? And that's fine. None of this advice changes. The only thing that changes is the timeline. I'm going to go back to Dead Sky Publishing as the example. They are able to kind of get that brand identity going very quickly because there's very low competition in the Western-themed splatter horror space. There aren't a lot of other publishers that do that. So they can grab onto that brand identity and make it their own pretty quickly. If you're going to do superheroes against Marvel and DC, yeah, that's going to be a much taller order. That's not to say you can't do it. I'm not telling you can't do it. But you have to be prepared for a long haul to kind of steal some of that market share away from Marvel and DC. That's an uphill climb. Again, I'm not saying don't do it, but you have to be prepared that it's going to take a much longer period of time to make that association with superheroes with your brand identity. What's the compromise there? What's a better way to do that? The better way to do that is to say, okay, let's create another genre or plant our flag in a different genre like science fiction or like supernatural magic or dark magic or something, because a lot of the superheroes that are in Marvel and DC are based on that same are based in their origins are based in science fiction or are based in the supernatural. So you could plant your flag in something that is supernatural based, as example, and then create a whole realm of magic based superheroes. It's not the same thing as saying I'm going to compete with Marvel and DC. I'm going to sort of compete in something that's closely adjacent, and then you can push that forward. So there are little tricks and ways around it, but if you're going to go head to head with Marvel and DC, be prepared for a very long trip. It's not going to be quick. So what's the big idea? The big idea here is if you have any marketing experience or you come from a marketing background, nothing I'm saying here is a surprise or shock at all. A brand isn't just your logo. It's not the font that you use for your logo. It's not the color palette that you use for your marketing materials. That is not a brand. A brand is what readers think of when somebody pulls them aside and says, what do you think of publisher A or publisher B or publisher C? What are they known for? That is your brand. That's your brand identity. there are two things you need to do to be able to kind of establish that brand identity, control it, and build up a fan base around it. First, you have to pick a genre, and you have to kind of wrap all of your titles around that genre. You can't have science fiction over here, comedy over there, romance over here, and horror over there. You're going to be all over the place. And readers are not going to be able to build up any kind of association between the publisher and what they produce. And that is a real big problem for this market share conversation. The second thing you have to do is persistence. You have to create some ongoing titles that fit within that genre. So you can't say, well, I make romance comics. Okay, that's fine. Which romance comics do you make? Well, we had a miniseries over here and did a one-shot over there, and it's very inconsistent. That does not get readers hooked. There has to be a steady stream. Even if it's quarterly, there has to be a steady stream of ongoing titles where customers can rely on them, they can look forward to them, and they can think about collecting them. Now, we don't want to get too far into the collecting rabbit hole, but yeah, unfortunately, that's the name of the game, and that's part of it. So you have to do that. So that's it. That's the article. But let me know what you think. Tell me below which publisher you think is doing a really good job about brand marketing, and let us know if maybe there's some stuff we should be reviewing that we're not. That's the one thing. And number two, tell me if you know which publisher do you think could be doing better but isn't because they're basically screwing it up. Let me know in the comments section. So thank you very much for joining, and stay tuned through the outro for more videos just like this one.